I'm so glad to hear that from you, and I hope that every corporate CEO will listen and take to heart the words you just said.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Senator King. Thanks to all the witnesses for being here. Dr. Gleason, if I could just start with you, I just want to start with a question about Oak Ridge National Lab. Since you're here from that institution, you've worked there for more than 30 years, is that right? 34, I think you said in your opening statement. Do you mind if I ask, do you happen to live in the area as well?
I do.
Here's why I'm asking. You're probably familiar with the role of Oak Ridge in the Manhattan Project, I bet. Is that fair to say?
I am, yes.
Could you just give us, for the benefit of those who are watching the hearing, could you just give us a thumbnail sketch of what Oak Ridge did for the country, to the extent that you know it? It doesn't need to be detailed, but just give us a synopsis, what Oak Ridge did for the country during the Manhattan Project.
Yeah, I mean, Oak Ridge, was stood up in the early 40s to try to help build the nuclear material that would power the bomb. So we built the world's first continuously operating nuclear reactor called the graphite reactor, which is part of that process. The graphite reactor is no longer operational, but you can go look at it. It's a wonderful tour stop when you come to Oak Ridge. But we are very proud of our roots in the Manhattan Project, and it continues to inform our national security mission part of what we do. We do Office of Science work, we do national security work, but our roots in the Manhattan Project, one of the big areas that came out of that was our material science strength. And we have a huge pillar and strength of material science that its roots go back to that Manhattan Project and Oak Ridge's contributions.
Very good. Thank you for that. I ask because Oak Ridge was such a critical part of the Manhattan Project, as you say, and the Oppenheimer movie of this last year, I think, raised awareness about what that project looked like and how it got started and the importance of Los Alamos. But really, at Oak Ridge, the government produced plutonium, and then there were other uranium processing sites around the country, including in my home state of Missouri, in St. Louis. And as you probably know, in both Oak Ridge and St. Louis, despite the fantastic, vital contributions of those processing plants, facilities, and labs to our national security, the nuclear waste was not properly disposed of in either place. And in Oak Ridge, the effects on the community have been severe. And I just want to quote from one of your fellow residents there in the Oak Ridge area. Tanvi Cardile is her name. She's the coordinator for the Oak Ridge Environmental Peace Alliance, who has said that it is time that people in Oak Ridge receive compensation for being exposed to radiation from nuclear waste. And now Oak Ridge, as we speak, is a Superfund site. And that is good. It's long overdue that it be cleaned up. But not only should it be cleaned up, those folks, your neighbors in the area who've been exposed to nuclear radiation over the years ought to be compensated for it, just like in the city and region of St. Louis. And I bring all of this up because this body, to its credit, passed legislation that would compensate the good folks of Oak Ridge and the St. Louis area and other similar nuclear sites and other folks who were exposed to downwind testing during the Manhattan era and the Cold War era. We passed that legislation by 69 votes. And I look across the aisle, Senator King voted for that. I appreciate that, Senator, and most of my colleagues. It was a huge vote. It's now in the House of Representatives, and having you here from Oak Ridge, considering everything Oak Ridge and the entire region there that you work at has done for this country, I couldn't let the opportunity pass to thank the good people of Oak Ridge, to thank the scientists that you work with, to thank that community, and also to call on my colleagues in the House to pass this legislation, compensate these good Americans who bore the brunt of our effort in the Second World War and the Cold War, which we won because of the effort of people at Oak Ridge and in St. Louis and in the residents who weren't themselves scientists but lived in the area and have suffered the effects of the nuclear radiation. They're proud to be Americans and to have served in this effort. They deserve compensation, however, just as they deserve to have their communities cleaned up. So thank you, Dr. Gleason, for testifying about the significance of that. Dr. Koschek, if I could just come to you in my remaining moments here, just about the dangers posed by China and AI. You highlighted in your opening statement, your written statement, the 2017 National Intelligence Law in the PRC requiring Chinese citizens and organizations to share information with state intelligence. Can you just speak to the dangers of American AI companies doing business with China, investing in Chinese AI, partnering with the Chinese businesses, whether overtly state-controlled or not? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Senator, Thank you for that question. I think it hits right at the heart of the argument on economic security and national security. I think American businesses doing business in the PRC, at one point, our government promoted them to do it. And that's okay. Like, that was our understanding of the PRC back then. But things have changed. And today, if a company goes and invests in China, what they are doing is inherently supporting their economy, inherently supporting an authoritarian regime. They don't know whether what they're investing in is also fueling slave labor in Xinjiang. I think that is an important consideration for any American company who wants to invest in other countries. They have to take that into account. We have to be realistic about what is happening. We cannot live in a dreamland of the China we want to operate with. We do not control that. We control what is the China that we are operating with.
I'm so glad to hear that from you, and I hope that every corporate CEO will listen and take to heart the words you just said. I asked partly because I just had the opportunity to talk with an Intel executive who was testifying at a different committee. Intel, of course, is investing billions in China, and in Chinese AI in particular. And this executive argued to me, this was just 48 hours ago, argued to me that this is of great benefit to the United States. There are no security concerns with it at all. It's really good for America. But the telling thing was, you mentioned the Uyghurs, Xinjiang province. He would not condemn the persecution of the Uyghurs. He said, well, I can't speak to that. It's unclear if there really is any forced labor in China. This, I think, is frankly the moral hazard that our companies face. If they do business in China, if they find themselves compromised by the PRC, they run the risk of supporting slave labor, of helping the Chinese AI program in a way that is materially to our detriment, but is also, frankly, just morally wrong. So thank you for your clarity on that. And I just think these companies, these so-called American companies, it's time that they actually did something for the values that we cherish as Americans. And ending slave labor ought to be at the very top of that list. And I frankly am sick of these companies taking billions. Intel is getting billions, $8.5 billion just approved to go to Intel under recent laws that this body has passed. And yet they're turning around and spending billions in China and won't condemn slave labor. In fact, maybe benefiting from it. And I just think that's wrong. I see my time's expired. I have a couple more questions for you, Dr. Kaushik, just about safeguarding our national labs. So I'll give those to you in as written questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We might have a second round too if you can stay. Okay, Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. I want to thank the chairman and ranking member for this conversation. I love this chart, by the way. Thank you. Let me, I understand one of my colleagues talked about it, but I'm just going to put a finer point on this because I understand in this conversation just highlights the fact that a rapid increase in projected electricity demand is happening because of AI, because of data centers. And I know this in Nevada because we actually have both happening here, and we are a major hub for data centers. You just have conversations with the Switch in my state on this very topic. So I am very interested in how we address that demand, and I think it is everybody's responsibility to figure this out if we want to lead in this country in emerging technology, right? So if you have any additional information, I would love to hear it on how we address and be a part of the solution here to address that emerging demand as well. Ms. Fu?
Yes, this is something, as I mentioned earlier, something that the department is laser focused on. And I think it is due to our role in leadership in advanced computing, understanding what the energy needs of AI will be, but also in our role with the energy part of our name. We see an enormous opportunity here. It is true that energy demand is growing, it's doubling. Energy demand from data centers is doubling from a very low base. However, it is a local issue that we need to really get our heads around. We think that DOE has a really unique role here in helping to convene stakeholders. This is something that the Secretary has been thinking through. She's charged her Secretary Energy Advisory Board to look at this issue, and they recently came out with recommendations. We'd be happy to share them. We are starting to implement and look through those recommendations and see what we can do. We'll be convening stakeholders around the country in areas of high load growth. This is going to be an effort over the next several months. We do think that there are things that we can do now. And I think part of the challenge with AI load growth is that it is both a very large load and the expectations are very fast. You know, this large load is going to come online in the next now through the next few years. And so we have many different kinds of technologies that we're looking at that are going out to 2030. We're doing everything that we can to look at what we can unlock now. Permitting, of course, is one piece of that. We have actually an AI and permitting pilot that we have already launched to see how we can use AI to expedite and streamline the permitting process. And one of the things that we've been able to do is to take the entire corpus of NEPA documents, which normally go in a huge binder and get put on the shelf, and make them AI ready, digitize them and make them available to the entire scientific community and to industry to develop new tools to help with this process. But we know that there's near-term needs, mid-term needs, and longer-term needs, and DOE is focused on all of those.
And I know you are, because of your footprint in Nevada, by the way, and so thank you. My only ask is, and you talked a little bit about, you invite industry in to have them part of the solution. I talk with the CEO of Switch regularly, and I just talked to him about this issue. They have ideas.
Yes.
Right. And so they should be part of this discussion.
Absolutely.
Nevada is a perfect place to have this discussion because of DOE's footprint, but also there is this nexus between energy and water and the challenges we have there. There is also in Nevada a large footprint just of the federal government that should be partnering with state, private sector and figuring this out. And for that reason, I am hoping DOE is also partnering with the Department of Interior. You talked a little bit about permitting, but it's Department of Interior that owns a lot of the land, right? So I'm hoping that, and can you talk about that? Is there that partnership that's happening with other federal agencies, including the Department of Interior?
Yes, there's a lot of focus on this. We're working through the CEQ that's convening the interagency body. I'll say the AI and permitting pilot, we're working with the 13 agencies in the Permitting Council on this issue. And we've recently, through Savannah River National Lab, issued an RFI that looks at potentially siting data centers even on federal land.
Okay.
So we're looking at all of these issues, looking at all of these options. We understand the urgency of the issue.
Okay, and the only other stakeholder that must be at the table is our state and local folks, right? Because we manage our economic development, our population growth, our needs with the federal government because the federal government owns most of the land in the state. So I'm hoping that you pull our folks in as well in this conversation. It is crucial. Thank you. You talked a little bit about workforce that we need for the future. What else should we be aware of here in Congress that we have to focus on, particularly for that workforce of the future that is going to kind of lead and be a part of these emerging technologies? Anything that we didn't talk about that I need to know, or we need to know?
Happy to take that on. I think, Senator, that is an incredibly important question that is at the heart of this competition. The population of the PRC is 4 times ours.
Right.
They're producing 4 times as many bachelor degree holders in STEM, twice as many masters, and twice as many PhDs. This is not a competition that we faced in the Cold War. The population of the Soviet Union was nearly as much as ours. The economy was far below. And here, the population's much higher, much more talent to tap into. And they have these sophisticated programs that they're trying to bring more talent into their country, right? I'll give you the example. They have this National Innovation-Driven Development Strategy, which aims for the PRC to become a key hub for global high-end talent by 2050. Now, they've changed their visa and permanent residency programs. They've established a 1,000 Foreign Talents program alongside the 1,000 Talents program to recruit foreign nationals to China. And I think we need to have a talent strategy here. Mm-hmm. What does our talent strategy look like? DOE has some fellowships for U.S. nationals. I think NSF has their own fellowships. Agencies have their work cut out here, but at the same time, there is a big chokehold that only this body can solve, and that is that, I'll quote the Singaporean leader, Lee Yuan Koo, who said, when he was asked whether he thought China would overtake the United States in the 21st century, he said, no, because the United States has long attracted the world's best and brightest. Said that the United States fosters a diverse culture of creativity, and China will struggle to do so. Despite having 1.3 billion people to tap into, the United States has 7 billion people to tap into, because we can assemble a rest of the world team. And I think you see that in AI today. 65% of the AI startups, of the top AI startups, have at least one person as a founder or co-founder who came here through legal immigration means. I think that has to be an important part of the conversation on workforce. So we need an all-of-the-above approach here to be able to match the numbers that they're putting out in STEM PhDs and STEM masters, STEM bachelors.
And then finally, and I agree, but that can be done, Dr. Kaushik, with what your caution was before, is how do we secure? How do we ensure we're securing the technology, right, for our use in our labs? There's a way to balance it, and you believe that can be done.
Absolutely. There are, the guardrails I talk about, most of them are objectively laid out in what we call the National Security Decision Directive 189, which was issued during the Reagan administration during the Cold War, about protecting American technological advantage. The National Academies also did a report in 2022 at the direction of this body on protecting US technological advantage, and they said that it is possible. Now, what do we need to do to actually get there? I think we have to recognize the competition's a bit different. We cannot continue funding hypersonics research as basic research and saying that we will make that openly accessible. We have to classify the research when it needs to be classified. We have to have that conversation. A risk matrix cannot be a silver bullet. We have to have a broader conversation on what is okay to be made openly accessible and what needs to be behind closed doors, who should have access to certain research and who should not. And I think we need to be very careful about whether it is even people from our partner and allied countries to be able to have access to those, those technologies that we are researching that are of sensitive nature. Research, it's not just about preventing PRC access to those technologies. Sometimes we just don't want the fact that we are developing those technologies disclosed. And I think there's a way we can balance that, and we've done. I think NSPM 33 does a really good job at it. It was produced by the Trump administration as an all-of-government approach. The Biden administration, to its credit, has continued working on it, despite OSTP's massive delays in releasing implementation guidance. It is the right approach. The Trump administration also issued the Presidential Proclamation 10043, which bars the entry of certain Chinese graduate and postgraduate students who have ties to military civil fusion institutions. And I think that is taking a scalpel rather than a sledgehammer to this. And that is the right way to go about it.
Okay, thank you.
Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we've been sitting here a few minutes ago, I asked a question of ChatGPT-4. And the prompt was, give me a poem in the style of Robert W. Service about the U.S. Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. Okay? Robert W. Service is my favorite poet. He wrote about the gold rush, cremation of Sam McGee, the shooting of Dan McGrew. Anyway, that was what I asked. In 3 seconds, this is what I got back. In the hallowed halls of Congress where the mighty stand so tall, there's a group that tends the nation's needs, its energy and all. The Senate committee gathers round with purpose in their eyes, for the fires of coal and sun and wind they seek to harmonize. Old Service might have marveled, for their work is just as bold as the gold rush tales he spun so well of lands both harsh and cold. They wrestle with the power lines, the drilling and the frack, the forests and the oceans deep, and what they give us back. Oh, the senator from Texas, and by the way, this proves AI isn't always right. There's no senator from Texas on this committee. The senator from Texas, with a mind on oil's flow, speaks of wealth beneath the earth and profits yet to grow. Listen to this. But across the room, a voice rings clear from Maine's wild, rocky shore. There's wind upon the sea, my friend. We must demand much more. The cold fields of Wyoming, the pipelines out of sight, they spar with solar panels shining clean and bright, and as they hash their quarrels out with power in debate, the future of the nation's grid they strive to navigate. Isn't this amazing? This was 3 seconds. Yet all the while, the rivers run, the mountains stand so high, the forests whisper ancient tales beneath the open sky, and those who sit and legislate with duty on their chest know nature's gift is fleeting, and they must do their best. So let them weigh the costs and gain, let compromise be found, for in the hands of those who lead, the nation's fate is bound. And like the miners seeking gold in Service's rugged lore, the Senate digs for answers deep, on nature's precious shore. That's what AI can do, which I think was absolutely astounding. But the fact that it made a mistake, I think, is also a cautionary tale. Okay. Senator Brasso was talking about the electricity issue and the coming problems, and that's one of the reasons we're supporting, I don't know if you know, but 2 weeks ago we reported out a comprehensive permitting bill in order to unleash the power, particularly of renewables, because without transmission, we're not going to have those resources. Okay, one question on quantum computing and advanced computing. And I don't want to pursue this too deeply, but I want to be sure, Ms. Fu, that we're not duplicating. There are other people in the U.S. government working on this problem, and I just want to be sure that there's coordination, and you don't have to go into any detail, but assure me that you know what's going on in other agencies and that we're doing this, because this is an expensive proposition, that we're not duplicating and overlapping because of competing jurisdictions.
We're not duplicating. We're working closely with the White House National Quantum Coordination Office. We're closely with other agencies on this issue. And I think that what we talked about earlier around AI, and where DOE plays a role is around developing the capability. And so the foundries that we're developing, the test beds, the different kinds of user access programs, these are things that only DOE can do. We work with other agencies to build up the broader ecosystem, but the large-scale science and the facility side of this issue is something that is a DOE strength.
Well, please keep an eye on that issue.
Absolutely.
And in the context of this committee, are there ways that AI can assist us in the more efficient allocation of power, the more efficient running of the grid? There's a lot of inefficiency on the grid today, and we're developing what are called GETs, grid enhancement technologies. I think that a complex system like the grid, and by the way, we need to distinguish between power and the grid, between capacity and the wires. But can AI be helpful to us in more efficiently managing the grid?
It can, and I think just taking it back to the poem that you wrote with ChatGPT earlier, I think that's a really good example. ChatGPT and all of the commercial large language models were trained on human-generated information off the entirety of the internet. And the kinds of things that we're talking about in our FAST proposal is not training on the internet. It's not training on data, human-generated data. It's training on scientific data where we can trust the provenance of that data and it can follow the laws of math or biology or physics. And so when we look at the grid and we look at the things that we are going to need, and that's a very, very high consequence use case. This is lights on or lights off. We need to 100% have trust in where the data is coming from to train this and what...
Assuming it's trustworthy data, my point is analyzing massive data about how the grid is operating will enable us to operate it more efficiently. Is that correct?
Yes, we think that there is a huge use case on using AI to look at how we control massive systems like the electric grid.
Thank you. Final point, and we've touched on this, we just did, Mr. Kaushik, how much talent are we losing because of our not very functional immigration system? And, the quote from Lee Kuan Yew, who's a genius, is very appropriate, but my sense is it used to be a lot of foreign students were coming to the U.S., they'd get a graduate degree from Stanford or Notre Dame or NYU, and they'd stay. Now they're leaving. Now we're making it harder for them to stay. How do we open up this system safely? I understand there's security concerns, but my sense is we're losing a lot of talent.
Certainly, Senator. I think there was a recent study that was done which found that over 50% of AI PhD graduates who leave the country cite that as the reason why they are leaving the country.
Because of the immigration law?
Yes.
So there's a pile of talent who we're chasing away.
Correct. And many of them are from nations which we consider as partners and allies, right? And I think that is something that we have to recognize, that there is a breadth.
So we're doing this not only to Chinese people or Russian people, but we're doing it to Australians or people from France or Germany.
Correct. Yes, Senator.
That's just crazy.
That is totally the case. In fact, the CCP recognizes this, and I'm going to give you some quotes directly from them, where commenting on the U.S. retention of Chinese STEM students, I'll just say, the head of CCP's Central Talent Work Coordination Group complained that the number of talents lost in China ranks first in the world. But now, if you look at their data, granted all the issues in their data, the fraction of the Chinese students who are returning home is increasing. Despite long-term stay rates, like if you look at students from the PRC who graduated from US universities in 2015, over 90% of them are still in the United States. But that number is declining overall. Especially at the undergraduate level, it's declining a lot. State-run consulting firm wrote in an AI policy white paper in China that US restrictions on immigration have provided China opportunities to bolster its ranks of high-end talent.
Brilliant.
So these are direct quotes from the Chinese Communist Party.
I mean, really, shouldn't we, assuming sufficient security analysis, shouldn't we just staple a green card to diplomas?
I think, Senator, that's a worthy consideration. I would say that we do need security provisions attached, like some of the provisions that were under consideration during the Chips and Science Act, for instance, of applying sanctions to people who are found guilty of economic or industrial espionage or academic espionage. I think that is something that we should be...
deal with that, and that's a small percentage.
Correct.
In terms of gaining a huge amount of talent that will drive this country into the future.
I think what you're saying is absolutely right, and this is what Bill Evanina, who was the former counterintelligence chief in the previous administration, also said, that we bring about 350,000 Chinese students here every year. We have very liberal student visa policies for them. About 1 in 1,000 of them are bad faith actors. And so we need that scalpel-based approach to remove that 1 out of 1,000 rather than shutting the door on all 350,000. And I think that is the right approach that the Trump administration took with its presidential proclamation 10043 and NSPM 33 and the likes. I think there are obviously still a lot of issues that we need to deal with, and that can be done. At the same time, I think it was Senator Cantwell who said during Chips and Science that either we recognize this problem today or we will wake up in 10 years and China will be ahead in everything and we'll have no time to work on it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.